Hi everyone and welcome to my kitchen. Today I wanted to show you something that's a bit of a specialty of mine and something that I make on a regular basis to share with others. And these are my chocolate spice leathers. These are a dehydrated raw snack food that can really also be used as a superfood as well, just to nourish yourself and when you're on the go. And these guys are amazingly tasty and not very hard to make either. It only requires that you have a dehydrator to go through this process, and also a high power blender and or a food processor. And I'll go into those details as I show you how to create this. So stay tuned and I'll show you how it's all done. Okay, so this is what we're going to be working with. In my Vitamix container here, I've already got the amount of bananas sorted that I need, which is exactly 900 grams, which could be anywhere from like 8 to 10 bananas depending on how large. I also highly recommend using a digital scale because these are helpful. If you are not used to eyeballing things, then you can just certainly get the right measurements and get the flavor profile that you want. So you want to make sure that you're using a high power blender for this. Otherwise, you're just not going to be able to get the mixture gathered in together and broken apart to get a nice smooth texture for the leather. If you don't have a high power blender, you can use a food processor, but you will get more chunky little mix, and then you're going to find that will give more texture to your product, which is fine if that's what you would like. You can use a food processor instead. So the bananas are just the base. They get everything to stick together to bind. The next ingredient that we're going to be using here is maca powder. Now, maca root is a wonderful adaptogenic herb. It also has a root, I should say. It also has a wonderful musky flavor to it as well that goes really well with this combination of ingredients. The other ingredient that we're going to be using here is, and the amount we're using of the maca is 25 grams. The next ingredient here is the cinnamon powder. This is Ceylon cinnamon, which is a true cinnamon. And this powder is 15 grams that we're using for the recipe. This is also a great, wonderful blood sugar regulator, and honestly, it just enhances the flavor profile of anything. The next ingredient up is going to be cacao nibs. Now these are raw, fermented, and you could use whole cacao beans as well, but the nibs I find it just work a lot better with the grinding process. And very powerful antioxidant, very high source of magnesium. Overall, feel good sensation and relaxation. The next ingredient up is going to be, actually before I get to that one, the amount we're using here of the nibs is 100 grams. The next ingredient up is going to be organic, and by the way, all these ingredients are organic. I do encourage everyone to support organic practices instead of conventional. The organic almond butter, raw, is going to be our next ingredient, and we're going to be using 100 grams of this as well. A little tip for these guys, if you buy in the jars like this, the oil separation tends to occur. So what I do is I leave it upside down for a little while, maybe a day or two. That way it gets the oil to kind of make its way back to the other end, and then you can easily stir it in without having to have all the carbohydrates sitting on the bottom and all the oil sitting on the top. Just a little time saver tip. And this really adds a wonderful flavor profile to the recipe, as well gives a little bit of more protein in here as well. The next ingredient up is going to be cayenne pepper. Now this, you're not going to be using a lot of it. In fact, you can use it to taste. In my recipe, I usually use 1/2 of a teaspoon, and you may want to go for a little bit less, if you maybe just a 1/4 teaspoon if you don't like too much spice. If you do really like spice, then maybe you want to go up to 3/4 of a teaspoon. I personally like half. And the final ingredient we're going to be using here is sea salt. Actually, this is a combination of Himalayan salt and sea salt. I like mixing them together, so it's just here in the bag. You're not going to be using much of this either. It's just 1/4 of a teaspoon to bring out all the other flavors and that perfect alkalizing element to any recipe. I just find that it really helps bring out the flavors and get things to mesh well together. So this is going to be a lineup of ingredients, and I'm going to show you the order in which we put these in, because that will make an importance when you're getting efficiency to blend out of the Vitamix or any high power blender you might be using. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to put in is the smaller things, smaller quantity items that will actually bring in a lot of that special flavor. If we want to put them in first so that they get thoroughly blended in and don't just end up sitting on top. So here's going to be our cayenne pepper. Just going to do about my half teaspoon, just about. Next, I'm going to put in the powdered stuff, all the powdered stuff, because I don't want this stuff to just jump all out and get all over the place in the Vitamix. It makes more of a mess. So I have my sea salt here with the maca, and I'm going to put that in next. Let's get all that out. Next is the cinnamon. Next, I'm going to put in the cacao nibs. Just spread that around evenly. And the reason I still have this on my scale is because now I can tare this and I can simply get the right amount of almond butter directly in here without having to basically dirty another cup. So I'm going to weigh out 100 grams of this, just putting it on top. And just going to be a couple of spoons. Almost halfway. And just a little bit more will do it. And there we go. Just a notch over 100 grams, that's alright. Put that aside. And the last thing I'm going to do is top off the mixture with just a little bit of the 900 grams of the banana, because this way, as I said, it will just prevent a lot of splashing from occurring and then you having to mix it all in. In fact, when you get real pro with the Vitamix, you can even find ways to not have to resort to the prong that you have to mix things up with and push it down. I've pretty much gotten really used to this, so I'm able to do this without it. But if you're not, I'd really suggest you use the prong that comes with the Vitamix so that you can get the mixture well sorted. What I'll do is I'll spin this for a couple seconds and then I'll stop it. I'll give it a bit of a shake to get everything to come down, and give it a bit more, because this will eventually start to heat up if you just let it run continuously, so you will have to shake it up a bit as you make progress. And here we go, starting at the low speed and working way up. Just like that, stop it, a bit of a shake. And the banana starts to liquefy and it begins to draw everything in. One or two more times ought to do it. And that's it. That's going to be pretty much done. Yeah, so here we have our texture, the consistency. As you can see, it's got a lot of viscosity to it, and this is what you want. This was actually originally a smoothie recipe in which I would add water or tea to the base so you get more liquidy, but I had decided to, without adding any extra liquid, I could just make this into a leather by not having that liquid, and then you just dehydrate it and it comes out as a wonderful fruit leather type snack that you can have. So now that the mixture is done, this is going to give us about enough for 2 trays on the Excalibur dehydrators, and I'll show you how to lay that down next. Okay, so next step, I have the dehydrator tray here with a Teflon sheet on top ready to go. And I'm a bit fanatical about this. You don't have to be this precise, but I weighed out the mixture so that I know how much would we have to put on the tray. You don't have to go through that process. You can just eyeball it. And so I know that I'm going to be putting in 570 grams. So that's how much I'm going to weigh out. I'm just going to kind of try to cover most of the base, and then I'm going to shake it into place afterwards. almost there. A little bit more. Alright. So that is tray number 1. Next thing we're going to do, I'm going to push all this aside. And what's going to help here is just give it a bit of a swirling, circling action like that. It gets it to flatten out and spread out. And then to take advantage of the entire surface area, I just use a thin spatula like this. Make sure that it's rubber, silicone, something that won't scratch the Teflon sheet. You definitely want to be using metal. And just kind of stretch it out like that. You can make this as perfect or as imperfect as you like. I'm a bit of a perfectionist, I'm not going to lie, so I do tend to take a bit longer to do this than probably the average person would. But getting this out to the corners and just relatively flattening it out as much as you can. Once you've done that, then you give it another bit more of round agitation, and you see how it all flattens up perfectly. Now you could leave it like this, you could use a spatula to fix up the edges and make it all nice so that when you cut it up you have perfect squares. That's all up to you if you want to make it presentable or not. And one thing to bear in mind when you are doing this, it is nice just to give it a tiny bit of a fold in the edge like that at the end, so that you get not so much of a thin layer at the end, because then it'll get a little bit drier in the dehydrator. And so that's just something you can do as a preventative measure. So next thing I'm going to do is show you the settings for the dehydrator, and we'll go from there. Okay guys, so this is the dehydrator tray here. And this is the Excalibur in particular. I like it because it's rectangular, it takes advantage of all the space that's available, as opposed to the round ones. Also, the fan at the back does give good circulation of the air so that you get good dehydration happening on everywhere, so things dry evenly. And so I have the finished tray here. Just going to put it in here. And I'm going to turn this on now and continue with the other trays that I'm going to make, and then just add them in as I go. Well, I have this setting for about 112 degrees Fahrenheit, give or take. There's a temperature dial here at the edge, so I have that set. And you're going to run this for about anywhere from 6, 8 to 10 to 12 hours. The dehydration time is a bit pending on the atmospheric temperature as well, if there's more humidity in your home or not, if it's warmer in your home or not. So that's why there's that little bit of a flex of range. So I'm going to set my timer for about 10 hours, and then at that point I'll come check on it. If it's ready before, then that's okay too. What I will do at that point is take this out and I'll show you how to flip it over to get the other side dried evenly as well. And that's it. And just cover up with the cover. See you in a bit. Okay everyone, and we're back. So this is the finished, well, almost finished part. It's been dehydrating for about 16 hours actually. After 10 hours I found it wasn't quite dry enough yet, and if it isn't, then when you peel this off, too much of it will stick to the Teflon sheet, and you don't want that to happen. Once you have it ready, all you do, it's pretty secured, so you just flip it over onto the tray itself, and then you bend out slightly at the corners, slowly and gently, and you'll see that hardly anything at all gets stuck to the Teflon sheet. If you're seeing too much get stuck, especially starting on the edges, then you know you need to dehydrate it for longer. And don't worry, you're not going to over dehydrate. Just as long as the temperature stays low enough, you're good. I actually lowered the temperature on mine to 110 Fahrenheit, because that way, by going over a little longer than I normally would have done probably, I just feel that it will give a more even drying out, and I don't want to risk damaging, or minimizing rather, any potential amount of damage to the natural enzymes in the raw ingredients. So I'm kind of just sort of circulating my way around it, because if I go straight for the center where it's at its softest, it might pull up and get stuck to the Teflon sheet. We don't want that. So just gradually work your way through it. And yeah, you'll see that there's residue on the Teflon sheet. That's normal. But if you were having to a point where you would need to bring in spatula, let's say, to push off some of the stuff that's sticking on, feed it back onto the leather itself, then, as I said, you need to dehydrate it for longer. And we're about there. So that's it. Now that we have the reverse side on top, we just insert this back into the dehydrator, and at this point, probably about another 6 hours will do it. We'll check back in when that's done. So here we are with these beauties all finished up. I actually had them dehydrating for about 10 hours or so after I had flipped them over. Again, it will vary, so don't worry too much about how long it is. Just keep checking on it, and so that it gets to a nice flabby, leathery consistency. It's not sticky, it's just nice and dry. Now, this is my preferred method of cutting these things, is with a cutting board. That's because I actually do this a lot, so I find it saves me a lot of time. You could also roll these over with some saran wrap if you want to have it more like a fruit roll up, and then you just break off pieces as you eat it. But I package a lot of these, so this one here is going to be, well, I'm probably going to eat this one. But basically, just lining it up and cutting it like so. And you got strips, and all you do is cut along the other ends, and voila. Then you can weigh them out if you're packaging them, like I do, or you can just simply enjoy them as a snack. I will suggest as well that if you are going to be making a batch like this, to really take advantage of a dehydrator, considering that you got about 9 trays in there if you're using the Excalibur, it will give you ample room to make at least 4 batches of what we made here today. So take advantage of that, or do a bunch of snacks all at once, so that you can take advantage of basically the energy you're expending to get that done. So I hope this has been helpful, and cannot wait to get my teeth into some of these. Alright guys, cheers. So I hope you guys found that helpful and inspiring for you to make your own dehydrated creations. If you have any questions about dehydration processes, by all means, leave me a comment, ask a question. I'm doing this for some time, and there's so many different ways you can change things up, mix up the ingredient variables. And if you don't have a dehydrator and you'd like to try some of these for yourself, you can get them from me. Feel free to contact me. And have I mentioned how amazing these are? Like, I'll just keep eating these. Anyways, they make a great snack. They store really well, easily for up to 3 months, maybe more, because we've dehydrated out the moisture content. So, makes a great energizing snack and tastes great. Cheers.